My brother got a car, a college fund, and a dream job through family. I got a bus pass and a lecture. Now he wants me to help pay off his debt. I remember the way the sun hit the driveway the morning they rolled out his car like it was some grand coronation. A gleaming, slate-blue sedan, polished within an inch of its life, bow resting atop the hood like some twisted trophy. Our father had this way of smiling when he was proud, tight-lipped, like he didn't want to admit he had a heart at all. But that day, he beamed, teeth and all. My mother clapped her hands together and called it a moment worth remembering. I was 14 then. My brother Austin had just turned 16 and the keys were already in his hand. He didn't even know how to drive. That didn't matter. In our house, what Austin didn't know was simply an inconvenience to be corrected by someone else, preferably me. The funny thing is, that morning no one noticed I was late for school. Again. I caught the bus 2 blocks down, wind stinging my face, coat too thin for the season. I watched the back of that car disappear down the road, Austin waving through the rear window while I tried to hide the holes in my shoes. They didn't know I was failing science. Or maybe they did. And they just chalked it up to laziness. That was the running theory. If you applied yourself like your brother does. That sentence became the soundtrack of my adolescence. Sometimes I'd hear it in my sleep, like a twisted lullaby set to the rhythm of disappointment. Austin was the miracle child, the firstborn, the athlete, the scholar, the boy who could punch a hole in the drywall and still be told he's just going through a phase. He got second, third, and fourth chances served on silver platters. I got silence. Or worse, concern disguised as criticism. When I crashed my bike, I was told I should have watched where I was going. When Austin totaled his car 2 months after getting it, drunk on borrowed time and vodka he swore he didn't drink, our parents called it a learning experience. They bought him another car. Not new this time, but new enough. Still smelled like privilege. By the time Austin was choosing between 3 colleges, all private, all expensive, I was pulling shifts at the grocery store after school, saving coins in a glass jar marked someday. He got a full ride, courtesy of our parents and Uncle Rick, who was on the board of trustees at one of the schools. I didn't even get the application fee covered when I asked to apply to the state school. College isn't for everyone, my father had said, not unkindly, as if that was supposed to be a comfort. Some people just need a different path. You've always been hands-on. I learned early that the only thing I could count on was the weight of my own resolve. While Austin partied through undergrad, switching majors like they were costumes, I worked. Days, nights, sometimes both. Factory lines, warehouse loading docks. One summer I scrubbed floors in a nursing home where they forgot the residents' birthdays but made damn sure the tiles gleamed like fresh ice. Every paycheck I got, I split, half into bills, half into savings. No safety net, no lifeline, no one asking if I was okay. I was expected to survive, expected to manage, and when I did, no one clapped. Still, over time, I built something. Not flashy, not headline-worthy, but solid. I moved into a modest apartment, 1 bedroom, cracked linoleum, but it was mine. Got a job in logistics, started in shipping, climbed up the chain by showing up when no one else did. I made a name for myself not by networking at family cookouts, but by working through every lunch break and learning the system better than the men who designed it. I stayed out of debt, lived below my means. By 30, I had savings, an emergency fund, stability. I didn't post about it online, didn't throw housewarming parties or anything crazy. I just kept going. Meanwhile, Austin coasted on borrowed credibility. He got his first job out of college through Uncle Rick. Again, a consulting gig with an inflated title and a 6-figure salary. I found out at dinner, when my mother casually dropped it into conversation while handing me the mashed potatoes. "Your brother's doing so well," she'd said, eyes glowing with that familiar pride. "We're so lucky." No one asked how my job was going, so I smiled, said nothing, drank water instead of coffee, let the conversation float over my head like a cloud of perfume I had no interest in smelling. Austin was there too, lounging in the corner like a prince home from a war he never fought. When he caught my eye, he winked, as if we were in on the same joke. We weren't. Then came the crash. It didn't happen all at once. These things never do. First, it was the job. Downsized, restructured, eliminated. Corporate speak for, "You've outlived your usefulness." He didn't tell anyone for 2 months. Just kept living like the paychecks were still rolling in. Credit cards, loans, rent for a downtown loft he couldn't afford without severance. Then the car, leased, not owned, repoed in the night like a thief reclaiming stolen time. When he finally told my parents, they treated it like another bump in the road. "He's under a lot of pressure," they said. "It's hard out there. He just needs support." Support, a word I'd never tasted. The call came on a Sunday. I was cleaning out my fridge, tossing expired yogurt and old takeout. I almost didn't answer when I saw his name flashing on the screen. But something in me, call it morbid curiosity, picked up. "Hey man," he started, too casual, like we were old friends catching up, not estranged siblings bound by nothing but DNA and the echo of our parents' favoritism. I need to talk to you about something." I waited. "So, things have been a little rough. Lost the job. Some debts built up. It's bad, man. Like, really bad." I said nothing, just let the silence hang. "I'm trying to get a loan, but my credit's shot. I was wondering if you could help me out. Maybe co-sign, or just front me a bit to get back on my feet. I'll pay you back, I swear." There it was. The ask. Coated in guilt, wrapped in desperation. He didn't mention the vacations, the designer clothes, the apartment he still hadn't moved out of. He didn't say sorry. Not once. I sat down on the cold kitchen tile. Let the phone rest against my ear like a confession. "How much?" I asked, though I already knew it would be obscene. He hesitated. 30. Maybe 35. 1,000. A laugh, sharp, hollow, escaped me before I could stop it. "You think I have $35,000 lying around?" "You're doing well, right?" he said quickly. "No debt." "Good job. I mean, you've always been the responsible one." That stung more than it should have. "You were given everything," I said slowly, the words tasting like ash. "And you still burned it all down." "It wasn't like that." "Wasn't it?" My voice had cooled, gone flat. "You got the car, the college, the connections. I got a bus pass and a lecture, and now you're calling me like I owe you something?" He went quiet. "I can't do this," I said finally. "Not this time." "Come on, man. We're family." I looked around my kitchen, clean, modest, full of things I'd bought with my own sweat and silence. "Exactly," I whispered, and ended the call. But I knew this wasn't over. Austin wasn't the type to give up after one try. And our parents? They'd come knocking too, because in their eyes, he was still the golden boy, still worth saving. And I was still the afterthought expected to step up when their favorite failed. But not this time. No, not this time. The week following Austin's call, the air thickened around me like the humidity before a thunderstorm. Silent but foreboding, as though even the weather could sense the long suppressed reckoning crawling its way out of the shadows. There was a shift in the way my phone rang, in the tight-lipped voicemails from my mother, each one laced with urgency, disguised as warmth. "Call me back, sweetheart. It's important." No mention of why, no need. The subtext had the same texture as always. "Your brother needs something, and it's time to remember who you are. The reliable one, the quiet one, the responsible ghost they only summoned when the golden child stumbled. On Thursday night, they ambushed me. I pulled into their driveway under a sun bleeding into dusk, the sky painted with bruised colors and stretched clouds. The house hadn't changed in years. White siding with a slight lean to the left, flower beds carved by my mother's hands, and wind chimes that had outlived 3 hurricanes. It was the kind of home people drive by and call quaint, without knowing the rot it harbored under the porch. I sat in the car a while, engine off, fingers gripping the steering wheel until the plastic creaked under my palms. I knew this was a mistake. But not showing up would have started a war I didn't have the energy to finish. They were waiting in the kitchen. The table was set, though no one was eating, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and cinnamon, an old trick of my mother's to make serious conversations feel cozy. My father sat at the head of the table like he always did, arms folded, a newspaper in front of him he hadn't read. My mother paced near the stove, pretending to adjust the flame that was already off. And Austin. He sat to the right, dressed in a sweatshirt too clean for someone supposedly in financial ruin. Hair gelled, face shaved, smile sharp as ever. "Hey," he said, rising a little, arms out in a half hug that never reached me. "Thanks for coming." I ignored him and sat down across the table, dragging the wooden chair noisily across the floor. The scrape echoed like a gunshot. My mother turned and forced a smile. I made coffee. Thought we could talk like a family. Family. That word again, thrown around like a bandage for every broken limb in this house. I nodded once. Let's talk. Austin opened his mouth, but my father held up a hand. Let's start with the facts. Of course. He always had to frame things like a courtroom. Austin's run into some trouble, he began, voice slow, deliberate, like he was reading a police report. He lost his job. He's got some debt. $38,000 to be exact. I raised an eyebrow. Thought it was 35. Austin shifted in his chair. There were some fees I forgot to mention. And rent? I asked. He nodded, sheepish. That too, my mother chimed in. We've helped him as much as we could, but you know your father's pension isn't exactly abundant. And with my part-time work. You bought him a car at 16, I interrupted, my voice flat, eyes never leaving Austin's face. You paid for 4 years of college, let him live rent-free for 2 after, and now he's almost 40, and you're telling me you can't help anymore, so I should? My mother's smile faltered. It's not about should, darling. It's about what's right. What's right? I repeated, the words rolling off my tongue like poison. Tell me, when I was working double shifts and taking night classes, where was what's right then? No one spoke. When I asked for help with tuition and you said I wasn't ready for college, was that right? My father exhaled, long and tired. We did what we thought was best. For him, I said. Austin raised both hands like a peace offering. Look, I didn't come here to start a fight. I just need a loan, that's all. I've got interviews lined up. As soon as I'm working again, I'll pay you back. Do you know how loans work? I asked, the sarcasm ablaze now. They require trust, history, discipline. I've changed, he said, all sincerity and no weight. I swear. I leaned forward. You changed? Or you're just scared because the floor finally gave out beneath you? His eyes narrowed. Why are you being like this? You've got the money. You could help. That was it, the sentence that broke the dam. You think this is about money? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think the years I spent building a life with no handouts, no lifelines, no one even checking in, can be reduced to a freaking check? Language, my mother whispered, reflexive and automatic. I stood up. No, you don't get to police my tone now. You don't get to tell me to be civil while you're asking me to clean up the mess you all helped make. Austin pushed his chair back. You're so self-righteous. You act like you didn't grow up in the same house. I stared at him, truly stared. He was still beautiful in that effortless way that made people forgive his lies. Still charming enough to ruin things and walk away with applause. But beneath the surface, I saw the cracks, the twitch in his jaw, the sweat on his brow, the rot beneath the polish. He had never learned consequences. And here they were, knocking. You're right, I said. We did grow up in the same house, but only one of us had to build a life from scratch. And then I walked out. Not fast, not dramatically, just calmly, like someone finally understanding that the fire wasn't worth putting out anymore. Let it burn. Let it all turn to ash. But again, it didn't end there. 2 days later, the texts began. Not from Austin, but from mutual acquaintances, cousins I hadn't seen in years, old friends of the family who had no business knowing my number. He's struggling, man. Just give him a break. You're the successful one now. Isn't that what family's for? Don't let pride ruin what's left of your relationship. Pride. That's what they called it when I didn't roll over. No one had anything to say when I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor, eating ramen, counting quarters to afford textbooks. Back then, it wasn't pride. It was perseverance. But now that I had something worth protecting, they twisted the narrative. Made me the villain for daring to hold on to it. I blocked every number, changed my voicemail, disappeared from the group chats. And still, the silence roared louder than any apology I'd never heard. But silence can be productive. It gives you space to think, to remember. I started pulling out old journals, notes, photos. I found a box of report cards my mother had saved, every one of Austin's glowing, decorated with stickers and teacher praise. Mine were absent. No one had kept them. I remembered getting a B+ in chemistry once and showing it to my father. only for him to glance at it and say, "Austin got an A in that class. Aim higher." I remembered mowing lawns all summer to buy my own second-hand laptop, while Austin got the latest MacBook as a back-to-school gift. Remembered the Thanksgiving when I mentioned a promotion, and they brushed past it to talk about Austin's vacation to Ibiza. The ledger of silence was long, and now it was due. Still, I wasn't immune to guilt. That's the worst part of being the responsible one. They teach you to feel bad for protecting yourself. You're trained to absorb other people's pain like it's your penance for being overlooked. So I met with a financial advisor, laid out the scenario in sterile terms, devoid of emotion. Hypothetical situation. A family member wants a loan, significant debt, no guarantee of return, high-risk behavior. What's the safest course of action? The man didn't even blink. "Do not give him a cent," he said, "unless you're willing to never see it again." I already knew the answer, but I needed to hear someone else say it. Still, Austin didn't stop trying. A week later, he showed up at my job. I was in the middle of a logistics meeting, walking the warehouse floor, clipboard in hand, when I saw him at the reception desk, hair tousled for effect, eyes red-rimmed, but dry. "I need 5 minutes," he said, ignoring the receptionist's protests. I gestured for him to follow me into the break room, closed the door, crossed my arms. "This is inappropriate," I said. "Then throw me out," he shot back. "Go ahead, show everyone how cold you've become." I didn't take the bait. He sat down, running his hands through his hair. "I'm not asking for charity, just a loan. Terms, agreement, we can draw something up. Legal, if you want." "I already gave you my answer." "People make mistakes," he said, voice cracking now. "Why is it so hard for you to forgive me?" I leaned against the counter. "Because you never apologized." That silenced him. "I forgave you for the car," I continued. "For the way you'd get drunk and laugh when I couldn't afford dinner. For the time you told a girl I liked that I was a loser. For every time you watched me struggle and didn't lift a finger. I forgave you because I thought that's what being the better man meant. But forgiveness doesn't mean I owe you anything, least of all my future." He wiped his face. "So that's it? You're cutting me off?" "No," I said. "I'm finally setting a boundary." He stood. "You've changed." "Good," I said. "Maybe now you will too." He left without another word. And this time, I didn't feel guilty, but I knew the story wasn't over. There would be fallout. From my parents, from him, from everyone who had built their comfort on my compliance. But I'd stopped being their scapegoat. Now I was just getting started. There's a different kind of quiet that settles in after you say no. It isn't peace. It isn't vindication. It's more like standing in the aftermath of a wildfire, charred landscape, still smoldering, ash spiraling gently through the air like ghosts of what you burned to protect yourself. That first week after I cut Austin off, I kept waiting for a sense of triumph to land, some delayed rush of self-respect finally actualized. It didn't come. Not then. Instead, I cleaned. Obsessively. Not because the apartment needed it. It was always spotless. But because my body needed to move. I scrubbed the corners of baseboards, polished the inside of the microwave, rearranged bookshelves by spine color and theme. It was ritualistic, meditative, and beneath the surface, a kind of mourning. Not for Austin. Not for the family that had let me become invisible. But for the idea of fairness I had clung to longer than I should have. That maybe, if I worked hard enough, waited long enough, proved myself flawlessly enough, someone would say, "We were wrong. You mattered all along." But that fantasy had been dying slowly since I was a teenager. All I did now was finish the burial. It didn't take long for the family machine to start grinding again. The first strike came not from Austin but from my mother. She showed up at my door unannounced, her hands gripping a tray of her infamous lemon bars like they were some ancient peace offering forged from powdered sugar and guilt. "I was in the neighborhood," she said. She lived 45 minutes away. There was no neighborhood here. I let her in, mostly because I wanted to see what tactic she'd use this time. She took in my apartment with that passive-aggressive once-over she'd mastered years ago, eyes sweeping the room with a smile that never quite reached the edges of her face. "It's neat," she said, which was her version of approval. I said nothing, just offered her the seat she wanted and let her talk. "He's not doing well," she began, fingers fidgeting in her lap. Austin. He's lost a lot of weight. He's barely sleeping. I'm worried. Maybe he should have worried before he spent himself into oblivion, I replied. She sighed theatrically. He didn't mean for it to get this bad. You know how sensitive he is. I scoffed. Sensitive enough to spend 38 grand on designer watches and rent he couldn't afford? Her smile faltered. He didn't have a support system, not like you. That sentence was so backwards, so hilariously detached from reality that I nearly laughed out loud. I was alone, I said, voice low and sharp. You do remember that, don't you? Or did the years of favoritism fog your memory? She blinked, stunned by the venom in my tone. She wasn't used to this version of me. The one who didn't retreat, the one who didn't play nice just to keep the peace. You always seemed so self-sufficient, she said, as if that justified everything. That's because I had no choice. She looked at me for a long moment, and for once there was no patronizing mask on her face, just a kind of dawning realization, or maybe regret, but she didn't apologize. Not even then. We raised you both the best we could. No, I said. You raised Austin. You tolerated me. Her eyes glistened. Whether from shame or self-pity, I couldn't tell. Maybe both. He's your brother, she whispered, voice cracking. Family should take care of each other. That word again. Family. Like a leash. Like a guilt trip disguised as duty. I stood up. Family should also be accountable, I said. And if you want to keep pushing this conversation, I think we're done here. She left without finishing the lemon bar she had taken. I dumped the whole tray in the trash after the door closed. They were too sweet. Always had been. Over the next few weeks, the silence turned sour. Calls stopped. Messages dried up. I'd gone from background character to pariah in my own bloodline. A few relatives I hadn't spoken to since our grandmother's funeral suddenly had opinions. Passive-aggressive Facebook posts, vague text messages. A cousin even tagged me in a post about the virtue of compassion, clearly aimed at me, though wrapped in just enough plausible deniability to avoid confrontation. Austin disappeared, too. No calls, no texts, not even a drunk voicemail, just vanished. Part of me wondered if he'd finally hit bottom. Another part of me knew better. Austin didn't hit bottom, he just changed scenery. Then came the will. It started with a letter. Formal. Cream-colored envelope. My father's handwriting on the front in navy blue ink. The kind of envelope people associate with weddings or death. I opened it on the kitchen counter, the clock on the wall ticking a little too loudly as I unfolded the neatly typed document. They wanted to meet, not for an intervention, not to beg again, but to discuss the estate. I almost laughed. There was no estate. The house was mortgaged, the car was leased. My father's pension barely covered utilities, but they had something to protect, whatever scraps were left, and more importantly, the image they projected of control and legacy. The meeting was at a lawyer's office downtown, a cramped building nestled between a vape shop and an overpriced bakery. I recognized the lawyer, Mr. Crawley, from my childhood. He'd done my parents' taxes, drawn up wills for half the neighborhood. He looked older now, thinner, like the years had shaved off parts of him slowly, methodically. I was the last to arrive. Austin was already seated, clean-shaven, wearing a suit that didn't fit quite right. My parents sat beside him, united front. All eyes turned to me when I walked in. "Thanks for coming," Mr. Crawley said, gesturing for me to sit. I didn't shake anyone's hand. He cleared his throat, shuffling through papers. "Your parents wanted to go over some updates to the family will, just to make sure everything is understood and clear." I leaned back in the chair. "Why now?" My father spoke, voice clipped. "We're getting older. Health isn't what it used to be. We just want to be prepared." I watched him closely. His hands were shaking slightly. I hadn't noticed it before. Maybe there was truth to it. Or maybe this was another play. I didn't know anymore. Mr. Crawley continued. "The house, such as it is, will be left to Austin, of course. And any remaining funds from the pension, savings, and assets will be split. 80% to Austin, 20% to you." The room went quiet. I didn't react. "Why even bother with the 20%? I said finally. "Just say it." I was always the afterthought. "It's not about favoritism," my father said. "Austin will need more support. You're self-sufficient." "That's not an explanation," I said. "That's an excuse, again." We just want to do what's fair, my mother added. No, I replied. You want to do what's familiar, which is, give him everything and expect me to be grateful I got the scraps. You're not being reasonable, Austin chimed in, trying to play mediator now. This is about legacy. I turned to him. You think legacy is money? You think inheriting a house you'll probably default on is some kind of crown? I've changed, he said again, and I nearly laughed. You haven't changed, I said. You've just learned to beg in longer sentences. That stung. I saw it in the way his mouth tightened. Mr. Crawley cleared his throat again, trying to regain control. If this is going to become a legal dispute, it's not, I said. Keep it. All of it. That got everyone's attention. You don't want your share? My father asked. No, I said, because it was never mine to begin with, and I'm done pretending this family is anything more than a debt I've finally paid in full. I stood, collected nothing, walked out, and this time, I didn't look back. Not even when Austin called after me, voice cracking. Outside, the city felt colder, but also cleaner. I walked without a destination, letting the movement drain the fury from my limbs. Eventually, I ended up at a park I used to visit as a teenager. It was still the same, metal benches, cracked fountains, grass that never quite stayed green. I sat on the bench near the farthest edge, where no one ever went, and I breathed. Not relief, not joy, just breathe. For the first time in decades, I felt like I wasn't drowning in their expectations, in their omissions, in their quiet punishments for not being Austin. I wasn't healed. That would take years, if it happened at all. But I was free, and that was a start. There are moments in life when clarity doesn't arrive with a flash of lightning or a grand revelation. Sometimes it shows up in the form of quiet resolve, in the hum of an old refrigerator, or in the cold ring of coffee untouched at the bottom of a mug. It was on a Sunday morning, in the stillness of my apartment, that I realized the story with my family had already ended. The last conversation, the final page, had passed without ceremony. There was no dramatic closure, no thunderous collapse. Just silence, the kind that doesn't beg to be broken anymore. I didn't hear from Austin for nearly 3 months. After the will debacle, the family communication lines dried up entirely. No passive-aggressive texts, no sudden guilt-laden voicemails from our mother, no polite inquiries wrapped in pity. It was as though I had become the family's phantom limb, once essential, now amputated, and mentioned only when the pain of absence flared. That silence, which once would have gnawed at my guilt, now brought a strange comfort. There was no longer a performance to maintain. I didn't have to be the better man, the dependable brother, or the invisible pillar holding up their house of favoritism. I was simply a man who had said no and meant it. But just when the stillness felt permanent, Austin resurfaced. He sent a letter, of all things. Not a text, not a call. A real letter. Handwritten, uneven, smudged ink in places like he'd pressed too hard with the pen. It was 2 pages long, folded twice, placed inside a plain envelope with no return address. Just my name written on the front in hurried script. The postmark read from a city 200 miles away, one I didn't recognize. I read it once, then twice. The third time, I sat down and read it aloud to the walls of my apartment. He said he was sorry, but not in the way I'd been waiting for all those years. He didn't say, "I'm sorry I was the favorite." He didn't say, "I'm sorry our parents set me up and left you to fend for yourself." Instead, he said he was sorry for being blind, for not seeing me, for treating me like the backup plan, the human safety net, the brother who would always catch the falling pieces so he never had to learn how to land. He wrote about the debt, not just the financial disaster, but the deeper debt, the kind of emotional overdraft he had been writing for years, drawing on a balance he never built, using love and loyalty he hadn't earned. He had moved to a small town, he wrote, got a job at a repair garage, manual labor, honest work, said it felt good to sweat and see the result. He talked about waking up early, eating ramen, sleeping on a couch in the back room. He didn't complain. He said it felt like paying off something. He ended the letter with something I never thought I'd read. "If you never forgive me, I'll understand. But I want you to know I see you now. I remember the nights you worked 2 jobs while I partied. I remember the day I crashed my car and you walked 4 miles home from school in the rain, and no one asked why you were late. I see it now. I didn't then. and I'm sorry. Not because I want something from you, but because you deserved better than me." I sat with the letter for hours. Part of me wanted to throw it away. Part of me wanted to write back. Instead, I drove. I didn't tell anyone. Didn't announce it. I packed a bag, filled the gas tank, and let the road carry me toward that unfamiliar city. The drive was long, uneventful, the kind of stretch of highway that feels like limbo. No landmarks, no distractions. Just asphalt, yellow lines, and the hum of tires against the road. I found the garage easily. It was small, squat, tucked between a liquor store and an abandoned laundromat. A single neon sign buzzed above the front door. Hank's Auto Repair. The windows were grimy. The air smelled like oil and old rubber. I stepped inside. Austin was under a car, sleeves rolled up, grease on his forearms. He didn't see me at first. I stood there a moment, watching him struggle with a rusted bolt, his jaw clenched, sweat dripping down his temple. He said something under his breath, wiped his hands on a rag, and rolled out from beneath the vehicle. When he saw me, he froze. "Hey," he said. Just that. I nodded. "Hey." He stood slowly, wiped his hands again as if trying to clean off the years that hung between us. "You came," he said, voice cautious. "I read your letter." He waited, unsure what came next. So I walked past him, picked up a wrench from the workbench, turned it over in my hands. "You always got everything," I said quietly. "And I told myself that if you ever apologized, I'd throw it in your face. Tell you it was too little, too late. That you don't deserve forgiveness." He nodded. "You'd be right. But," I said, setting the wrench down, "I don't want to carry that anymore." He looked at me, confused. "I'm not here to forgive you because you need it," I continued. "I'm here because I need it. I need to let it go. Not for you, for me. I've spent so long being angry, resentful, and I've built a good life. But it's weighed down by all this unfinished business, and I'm tired." He didn't speak. Just stood there, breathing hard like he'd run a mile without moving. "I don't know if we'll ever be brothers the way we should have been," I said. "But I'm not going to hate you anymore. That part of the story is over." He nodded again, eyes glistening. "I'm not asking for anything," he said, voice hoarse. I'm glad you're here." We stood in silence for a while. Then he asked if I wanted a drink. We sat in the back room, shared a lukewarm root beer, and talked about nothing. Old movies, high school memories, his first month working at the garage. He told me about the guy who owned the place, Hank, who cursed like a sailor, but made the best chili in town. He said the work was hard but honest, that he hadn't used a credit card in 90 days, that he kept a notebook where he wrote down every cent he spent. "It's like rehab," he said, "for entitlement." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was the first time he'd ever made a joke at his own expense without deflecting. That felt real. I left before sunset. Didn't make promises to come back. Didn't say we were fixed. But I left lighter than I arrived. The months passed. Seasons turned. We kept in touch, but loosely. Calls now and then. A card on my birthday, signed simply, "From your brother." Still learning. My parents eventually reached out again. They softened. Age does that. There was no grand apology, no confessional moment. But they began to listen more, asked questions, sent photos. My mother even visited once. She stood in my kitchen, holding the same kind of lemon bar tray as before, but this time she actually asked how I'd been before talking about Austin. And I told her. We talked. Not as mother and son, but as two people trying to make peace with the years that had hollowed them. We didn't cry. We didn't hug. But she left with a smile that didn't feel forced. Years later, when my father passed, I didn't expect anything. But when the new will was read, it was different. There was no 80-20 split. No house passed down like a crown. Instead, everything was sold. The money divided evenly. A note was left for both of us. To my sons, I didn't always get it right. I thought giving meant loving. I thought silence meant strength. I see now that it wasn't enough. I hope this final gesture balances the scale, even just a little. Be good to each other. Whatever's left, let it be peace. Dad Austin and I stood outside the lawyer's office after the reading, the cold wind biting at our coats. He held the note in his hand, staring at it like it was a puzzle he'd never finish solving. "I didn't expect that," he said. "Neither did I." "I think he meant it," he added, folding the paper carefully. "Even if it came late." "Sometimes late is still on time," I replied. We stood in silence a while longer, then went our separate ways. That was years ago. Now I live in a house I bought myself. It's quiet. Sunlight spills through the windows in the morning and pools on the hardwood floor like it knows it's finally welcome. I still work in logistics, still take my coffee black, still remember every slight, every injustice, but they no longer define me. Austin still works at the garage. Sometimes he sends pictures. Cars he's fixed, sunsets from the back lot, Hank's infamous chili pot. He's doing okay. He's not rich. He's not powerful. But he's honest now. And that's more than I ever thought I'd be able to say. We talk once a month, sometimes more. It's not forced. It's not perfect. But it's real. He paid me back. Not with money, though he tried. I refused. He paid me back by changing, by staying changed, by never asking again. And I felt like the scales had finally balanced. The debt ledger had been closed, the account settled, not with vengeance, not with silence, but with truth. And that, I realized, was the life I'd built, debt-free, earned, undeniably mine.